Don't marry her, she's lying. The words didn't come from the priest or the guests or any of the men who feared me enough to stay silent. They came from somewhere lower, softer, almost lost beneath the music, and yet they cut through everything like a blade I never saw coming. And for the first time in years, I froze. The church was exactly how it was supposed to be. White marble glowing under warm light. Rows of polished wood filled with people who owed me loyalty or money or both. The air carrying that expensive floral scent that made everything feel controlled, planned, untouchable. I had built my life on control, on knowing every move before it happened, on never being surprised. And yet in that moment, standing at the altar in a tailored black suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, I felt something unfamiliar crawl under my skin. Victoria stood across from me, flawless, composed, the kind of woman who looked like she belonged in rooms like this. The kind of woman who knew exactly how to smile, without ever showing what she was thinking, and I had chosen her not because I believed in love, but because she made sense. Alliances always did. Power always did. The guests watched us with quiet anticipation, whispers tucked behind polite smiles, the kind of silence that only exists when everyone is pretending nothing dangerous could ever happen in a place this beautiful. I should have ignored it, that voice, that interruption, because nothing about my world allowed for randomness, but something in the way it was said, steady, certain, unafraid, made it impossible to dismiss. Slowly, almost against my own instinct, I looked down. She couldn't have been more than 7, maybe 8, standing just beyond the first row, small enough that most people hadn't even noticed her, wearing a simple dress that didn't belong in a room filled with tailored suits and designer gowns. Her hair slightly messy like she hadn't been prepared for any of this. But her eyes didn't match the rest of her. They were calm, too calm, like she had already decided something I hadn't. She didn't look scared of me, and that alone was enough to make my pulse shift. I leaned, slightly, just enough to hear her again, and she stepped closer like she had every right to be there. "She's not who you think," she whispered, softer this time, but sharper somehow, like she knew exactly what she was doing. I felt the room continue around me, the faint rustle of fabric, the low hum of conversation, the distant echo of footsteps. But it all sounded far away, like I was no longer standing in that church, but somewhere else entirely, somewhere quieter and more dangerous. I straightened, my expression unchanged, because that's what control looks like, but inside, something had already begun to shift, something I couldn't name yet. I glanced back at Victoria, at the perfect way she held herself, the precise angle of her smile, and for the first time, I didn't see certainty. I saw a question, and I hate questions, because questions mean something is missing. And in my world, the moment something is missing, it means someone is lying. I have stood in rooms where men twice my size lost their nerve with a single look, where deals worth millions shifted with a nod of my head, where silence meant obedience and hesitation meant weakness, and yet in that moment, with a child barely reaching my waist standing a few feet away, I felt something far more dangerous than fear. I felt uncertainty, and uncertainty has no place in my world. The priest cleared his throat gently, a subtle reminder that the ceremony had paused, that dozens of eyes were now fixed on me, waiting, always waiting for my next move, and I gave them what they expected, a calm nod, a controlled breath, a signal that everything was exactly as planned. Because that is what power looks like. It never breaks in public. "Shall we continue?" the priest asked, his voice steady but careful, as if he understood that this moment carried weight beyond tradition, beyond ceremony. I did not answer immediately. Instead, I let my gaze drift once more, not to Victoria, but to the girl. She had not moved. She had not looked away. Most people cannot hold eye contact with me for more than a second without flinching, without lowering their gaze. But she stood there as if none of that applied to her, as if whatever she knew gave her the right to stand her ground. That alone was enough to make me listen. I shifted slightly, just enough to step closer to the edge of the altar, my voice low when I spoke, meant only for her. "What is your name?" I asked. No hesitation. "Lily," she said, her voice soft but certain, like she had been waiting for that question. Lily. The name meant nothing. And yet something about it lingered in my mind longer than it should have. "You should not be here, Lily," I told her, not unkindly, just stating a fact. Because this was not a place for children who did not belong. She tilted her head slightly, studying me in a way that felt almost deliberate. Neither should she, Lily replied, glancing briefly toward Victoria, and that small movement, that single glance, was enough to shift the air around me. I turned back to Victoria, slower this time, more aware, more observant. She was still perfect, still composed, still exactly what she had been seconds ago. But now I noticed the way her fingers tightened slightly around the bouquet, the almost invisible tension in her shoulders, the fraction of a second delay before she smiled again. Small details. Details most people would miss. I do not miss details. Adrian, she said softly. My name carried just enough concern to sound real, just enough warmth to feel convincing. Is everything all right? There it was. The question. Perfectly timed. Perfectly delivered. And yet now, instead of reassurance, it felt like performance. I held her gaze, letting the silence stretch just a second longer than comfortable, long enough to see if she would break, if anything beneath that flawless exterior would surface. It did not. She was good. Very good. But perfection is never natural. And I have spent my entire life learning how to spot what is not natural. I exhaled slowly, turning back toward the priest, my expression returning to its usual calm, my voice steady when I finally spoke. Continue, I said, because stopping now would show doubt, and doubt invites weakness, and weakness invites chaos. The ceremony resumed, words flowing, vows forming, the illusion rebuilding itself piece by piece, but beneath it, something had already changed. I could feel it in the way my thoughts no longer followed the script, in the way my attention kept splitting between the woman in front of me and the child who should not have mattered but suddenly did. And as the priest spoke about trust and union and promises that bind, I found myself thinking about something far simpler, something far more dangerous. If Lily was right, then this was not a wedding. This was a mistake. The words kept coming, steady and ceremonial, echoing against marble and glass, but I was no longer listening to the meaning of them, only the rhythm, the pauses, the spaces in between where truth usually hides, and somewhere behind me, I could still feel her presence, small, silent, but impossible to ignore, like a question that refused to be buried. I have learned that instincts do not appear without reason. They are built over years of watching people lie with perfect smiles and steady voices, and right now, every instinct I had was awake. Victoria's voice drifted toward me as she repeated her vows, soft, controlled, every word placed exactly where it needed to be, and anyone else would have believed her, would have heard sincerity, but I was not anyone else. I watched her lips form each promise, and I began to notice the pattern, not in what she said, but in how she said it, the slight delay before certain words, the way her eyes held mine just a second too long, like she was measuring my reaction instead of sharing something real. Performance. Clean. Practiced. I shifted my gaze slightly, just enough to scan the room without drawing attention, because if something was wrong, it would not exist in isolation. Problems like this always have roots, always have connections. Near the back, one of the guests adjusted his position, subtle, almost invisible, but I caught it, the way his attention flickered not toward the ceremony, but toward Victoria, like he was waiting, not watching. Another detail, another thread. My jaw tightened just slightly, the only sign of the shift happening inside me. Then I spoke, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to interrupt the flow. Pause. I said, my voice calm but absolute, the kind of tone that does not ask for permission. The priest stopped immediately. The room followed. Silence returned, heavier this time, no longer polite, no longer comfortable. Victoria blinked once, a fraction too slow. Adrian, she said again, softer now, careful, like she was stepping onto uncertain ground. I turned my head just enough to meet her eyes fully, letting the silence stretch again, letting her feel it this time. I have a question, I said, simple, controlled. Questions are never just questions. They are tests. Of course, she replied, her smile returning, but it did not reach her eyes the same way anymore. There it was again, that tiny fracture. How long did it take you to decide this? I asked. The question sounded harmless. It was not. Her fingers tightened again around the bouquet, the petals shifting slightly under her grip. I do not understand, she said. And that was the first mistake. Because Victoria Hale always understands. Always. I took one slow step closer, closing the distance just enough to lower my voice without losing control of the room. The decision, I repeated, my tone even. To marry me. Another pause. This one longer. The kind that should not exist between two people about to promise their lives to each other. I have known for a long time, she answered finally, but now I could hear it, the smallest crack beneath the surface, like glass under pressure. I nodded once, as if satisfied, but inside, everything sharpened. Behind me, I heard the faintest shift of fabric, a small movement, and I did not need to turn to know it was her, still there, still watching. Lily had not left. She did not run. She did not hide. People who lie avoid attention. People who tell the truth stand still. I straightened, turning slightly away from Victoria, not enough to break the illusion, just enough to make a decision. My voice dropped, low and precise, directed toward the man standing discreetly along the side wall, the one who understood my language without needing explanation. Find out who she is, I said quietly, not specifying which she, because he would know. They always know. The man gave the slightest nod, almost invisible, and stepped back into the shadows of the room. The ceremony had not resumed, but it had not ended either. It hung there, suspended, like everything else. I turned back to Victoria, studying her one more time, not as a groom, but as a man who has spent his life identifying threats before they become real. And for the first time since I met her, I was no longer looking at a partner. I was looking for the truth. And the truth, I have learned, never hides without a reason. Time did not move the way it should have after that. It stretched, slowed, every second expanding just enough for me to see more than anyone else in that room realized I was seeing. And that is where truth always reveals itself, not in chaos, but in the quiet space before it. Victoria was still standing in front of me, still composed, still beautiful in that carefully constructed way that had convinced everyone else she belonged here. But now I could see the effort behind it. The way her breathing had shifted just slightly. The way her shoulders held tension she could not fully hide. And it confirmed what instinct had already begun to whisper. Something was wrong, and she knew it. Adrian, she said again, softer this time, her voice carrying a hint of something new. Not fear exactly, but awareness, like she could feel the ground shifting beneath her feet, even if she did not yet understand why. We should continue, she added gently, her tone almost persuasive now, as if she was trying to guide the moment back into place, back into the version of reality she needed. I did not respond immediately. Instead, I let my eyes drift past her again, not searching now, but confirming, and I saw it. The same man from before, now pretending to check his phone, his posture too casual, too deliberate, the kind of casual that only exists when someone is trying not to be noticed. Another thread, another piece. Everything was starting to connect. Not fully, not yet, but enough. Behind me, I heard a faint step, soft, careful, and then her voice again, closer this time. Not a whisper now, but still quiet enough that no one else would hear it. You are running out of time, Lily said, and the certainty in her tone did something I had not expected. It made me listen without resistance. I turned my head just slightly, enough to see her from the corner of my eye. She had moved closer to the aisle, still small, still out of place, but somehow now at the center of everything that mattered. Why are you here? I asked her, my voice low, controlled, because questions have weight, and I wanted to see how she carried it. She did not hesitate. Because no one else would tell you the truth, she answered, simple, direct, as if the answer had always been obvious. Truth. People use that word too easily. They dress lies in it. They hide behind it. But rarely do they stand in it without fear. I studied her for a second longer, searching for cracks, for signs of uncertainty, for anything that would tell me she was guessing, exaggerating, playing a part. There was nothing, just that same steady gaze. I turned back to Victoria slowly, and this time, I did not see a bride. I saw variables. I saw patterns. I saw a situation that no longer aligned with the outcome it was supposed to produce. Who is he? I asked suddenly, my voice cutting cleanly through the silence of the room. Victoria blinked again, faster this time. Who? She replied. But now the question felt forced, like she already knew the answer she was trying not to give. I did not look at the man. I did not need to. The one who cannot stop watching you, I said evenly, letting the words settle where they needed to. A flicker. There. Just a fraction of a second, but it was enough. Her eyes shifted. Not to me. Not to the guests. To him. And then back again. Too fast for most. Not fast enough for me. The room remained silent, but the silence had changed. It was no longer patient, no longer respectful. It was tense, uncertain, like everyone could feel something unraveling even if they did not understand what it was. I took one step back, creating distance, not just physically, but strategically, because distance gives perspective, and perspective reveals truth. We are not continuing, I said calmly, not raising my voice, not needing to, because control does not require volume. A ripple moved through the room, subtle but undeniable. Victoria's hand lowered slightly. The bouquet no longer held as tightly. Adrian, please, she said, and this time, there was something real in her voice, not love, not fear, but urgency. And urgency always comes from risk. I looked at her one last time, not as a man about to marry her, but as someone who needed to decide whether she was part of my world or a threat to it. Then I glanced down, just briefly, meeting Lily's eyes again. She did not smile. She did not speak. She just watched me, like she already knew what I was going to do. And that was the moment I understood something far more dangerous than any lie. This was not coincidence. This was intervention. The moment the words left my mouth, the illusion shattered without a sound. No glass breaking, no raised voices, just a shift in the air so subtle that only those who understood power could feel it. And everyone in that room understood power, which meant they all felt it. Victoria did not move at first, and that was her second mistake, because stillness can look like control, but in the wrong moment, it looks like calculation. "What are you doing?" she asked quietly, and now there was no softness left in her tone, only precision, like she was choosing each word carefully, weighing outcomes in real time. I did not answer her. Answers give people something to work with. Silence forces them to reveal more than they intend. I stepped down from the altar slowly, each movement deliberate, measured, giving the room time to react, to adjust, to wonder, and uncertainty spread faster than anything else. Conversations did not start. They held, suspended, like everyone was waiting for permission to breathe again. I stopped halfway down the aisle, turning just enough to face the man who had been pretending not to exist. "Step forward," I said, not loud, not aggressive, just clear, the kind of command that does not need repetition. For a second, nothing happened. Then he moved. Reluctantly. Carefully. Every step he took confirmed what I already knew. He did not belong here. Not in the way the others did. Not with the same confidence. Not with the same understanding of the rules. Victoria's hand dropped completely now, the bouquet, hanging loosely at her side, forgotten. "Adrian, this is unnecessary," she said, faster this time. Her composure slipping just enough to expose urgency, and urgency always means pressure. I glanced back at her briefly, just long enough to make one thing clear. "Nothing is unnecessary," I said evenly, then returned my attention to the man now standing a few feet away. He tried to hold my gaze. He failed after 2 seconds. That was all I needed. "Name," I said. "Daniel." He replied, too quickly, like he had rehearsed that part but not the rest. I nodded once, as if acknowledging something minor, but inside, every piece was locking into place. "Daniel," I repeated calmly, letting the name settle in the room, letting everyone hear it, remember it. Then I asked the only question that mattered. "How do you know her?" Silence. Not the kind that comes from confusion, but the kind that comes from calculation, from trying to find the safest lie. Victoria stepped forward then, closing the distance slightly, her voice sharper now. "He does not need to answer that," she said. And there it was, the first real break, the first moment she stepped out of the role she had been playing. I turned to her slowly, my expression unchanged, but my tone colder now, more precise. "He does," I said. The room felt smaller suddenly, tighter, like the walls had moved in just enough to trap the truth inside. Daniel swallowed, his hands tightening at his sides, and I watched everything. The tension in his shoulders, the hesitation in his breath, the flicker of his eyes toward Victoria before returning to me. That glance said more than any answer could. I did not need him to speak anymore. I already knew. I exhaled slowly, the decision settling into place with a clarity I had not felt since this day began. I turned back toward the altar, toward the life I had been about to step into, and for the first time, I saw it for what it really was, not an alliance, not a strategy, but a mistake waiting to happen. Then I looked down, just briefly, to where Lily stood, still watching, still silent, and I gave the smallest nod, almost imperceptible, but intentional. She had been right, and I do not ignore the truth once I see it. The silence did not break after that. It deepened, like the room itself understood that something irreversible had already happened, and once a truth surfaces, it does not go back into hiding. Daniel shifted his weight slightly, just enough to reveal discomfort, just enough to confirm that he had not expected this to unfold in front of an audience, and that told me everything I needed to know about his role in this. People who belong in my world do not get uncomfortable under pressure. They adapt, they adjust, they survive. He was doing none of those things. Victoria, on the other hand, had gone completely still again, but this time it was different. Not control, not calculation, but containment, like she was holding something back, something she could no longer afford to let slip. I turned toward her fully now, closing the distance between us with slow, deliberate steps, each one measured, each one intentional, because proximity changes everything. It removes distance, it removes escape, it forces truth to stand closer than lies can comfortably manage. You had one job, I said quietly, my voice low enough that only she could hear, but firm enough that she felt the weight of it. Her eyes met mine instantly, sharp, alert, searching for weakness, for hesitation, for anything she could use. And I did it, she replied, just as quietly, and there it was, not denial, not confusion, but deflection, precise and controlled. Did you? I asked, letting the question linger, letting it press against her composure. For a second, something flickered behind her eyes, not fear, not yet, but realization, like she understood that the version of me she had prepared for was no longer standing in front of her. I stepped back slightly, creating just enough space to shift the dynamic again, because control is not just about holding a position, it is about knowing when to move. This was never about the wedding, I said, more to the room now than to her, my voice steady, carrying without force. It was about access. A ripple moved through the guests, subtle but unmistakable, the kind of reaction that spreads when people begin to understand they are witnessing something they were not meant to see. Victoria's posture changed then, just slightly, her shoulders straightening, her chin lifting, like she had made a decision. You are making assumptions, she said, her tone returning to something colder, more distant, like she was stepping back into a role she knew well. No, I replied calmly. I am recognizing patterns. I turned my head just enough to glance at Daniel again, and he looked away immediately, confirming once more that he was the weakest link in whatever this was. Then I looked back at her. You chose him poorly, I added, not as an insult, but as an observation, because details matter, and mistakes always reveal more than intentions. Her lips pressed together for a brief second, the only sign that the comment had landed exactly where it needed to. Behind me, I heard movement again, quiet, controlled, and I did not need to turn to know that my instructions were already being carried out, that answers were being gathered faster than lies could be constructed. Tom was no longer on her side. You think you understand this, Victoria said, her voice softer now, but edged with something new, something almost desperate. You think you see the whole picture. I held her gaze, unblinking, unmoved. I see enough, I said simply. And that is the truth about power. You do not need every detail. You only need enough to make the right decision at the right time. I let the silence stretch one final time, then turned away from her completely, breaking the connection, ending the illusion without ceremony. My eyes found Lily again, still exactly where she had been, still watching, still waiting, like she had known this outcome from the beginning. I walked toward her slowly, ignoring the room, ignoring the tension, ignoring everything except the one person who had spoken the truth when no one else would. I stopped a few feet in front of her, looking down, studying her not as a child, but as a variable I had not yet accounted for. How did you know? I asked quietly. She did not smile. She did not hesitate. Because she came before, Lily said. And for the first time since this began, I felt something shift that had nothing to do with control. Because that was not just an answer. That was a warning. The words did not settle the way most answers do. They lingered, sharp and unresolved, like something unfinished, and I felt it immediately. The shift from suspicion to something deeper, something older, because in my world, repetition is never coincidence. She came before. I repeated quietly, more to myself than to Lily, testing the weight of it, measuring the implication behind something so simple, and I did not like what it suggested. Lily nodded once, small, certain, like she had already expected me to understand more than I was letting on. Not just her, she added, her voice still calm, still steady in a way that did not belong to someone her age. Others too. Others. The word landed heavier than anything else she had said. Patterns do not exist without repetition, and repetition means planning, and planning means intention. I straightened slowly, my eyes lifting from Lily back toward the room. But now I was not looking at people. I was looking at connections, at possibilities, at everything that could have been happening beneath the surface while I believed I was in control. Victoria had not moved far, but she had shifted her position just enough to create distance, just enough to place herself closer to the exit without making it obvious. And that alone told me she understood exactly how serious this had become. Daniel stood where I had left him, but now his posture had changed, more rigid, more alert, like he was waiting for something, not from me, but from her. That was the final confirmation. This was coordinated. I exhaled slowly, letting the realization settle into something usable, because realization without action is nothing. How many? I asked Lily without looking back down at her, my focus still on the room, still on the shifting pieces in front of me. 3, she said. No hesitation. No uncertainty. You were the fourth. The fourth. The number echoed in my mind, precise, calculated, and suddenly the entire situation rearranged itself into something far clearer than before. This was not about one mistake. This was a system, a method, something designed to repeat until it succeeded. My jaw tightened just slightly as I turned back toward Victoria, but this time, I did not see her as a variable. I saw her as part of a larger design. You planned this, I said, not as a question, not needing confirmation anymore. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time since I had known her, she did not try to soften her expression, did not try to maintain the illusion. Instead, she held my gaze with something closer to defiance. You planned yourself, she replied, her voice low, controlled, but stripped of pretense. Men like you always do. The room reacted again, subtle, restrained, but the tension had shifted from uncertainty to something sharper, something more dangerous, because now there were sides forming, even if no one had spoken them out loud. I took one slow step forward, closing the space between us again, not as a groom, not as a partner, but as someone reclaiming control of a situation that should never have existed. You underestimated one thing, I said evenly. She tilted her head slightly, waiting, calculating even now. And what is that? She asked. I did not answer her immediately. Instead, I glanced down once more, just briefly, to where Lily stood, small, silent, but undeniably central to everything that had changed. Then I looked back at Victoria, my expression completely still. Truth does not need power to survive, I said quietly. It only needs someone willing to speak it. Her gaze flickered for the first time, not away, but inward, like she was recalculating, adjusting, realizing that whatever plan she had constructed no longer held the same certainty it once did. Behind her, movement continued, quiet, controlled, my people doing exactly what they always did, finding answers faster than lies could keep up, and I knew it would not take long now. The truth was already here. It had been here the entire time. It just needed a voice. And somehow, that voice had come from the last place anyone would have expected. A child who was not afraid of me. And that alone made her the most dangerous person in the room. The room no longer felt like a place built for celebration. It felt like a stage where something unfinished was finally being exposed, layer by layer, and no one moved to stop it, because deep down, everyone understood that whatever was happening now mattered more than the ceremony itself. Victoria held her ground, but the stillness she wore so well before had changed shape. It was no longer confidence. It was containment, like she was deciding how much to reveal and how much to keep hidden. and that alone told me she had already lost control of the outcome. "You think this ends here?" she asked quietly, her voice no longer soft, no longer warm, but clear, deliberate, almost tired, as if she had already accepted that the version of this day she had planned was gone. I did not answer right away, because endings are not declared, they are recognized, and I was still watching, still measuring, still waiting for the final piece to fall into place. Behind her, one of my men stepped forward just slightly, enough for me to catch the movement without drawing attention, and that was all I needed, confirmation without interruption. Information had been found. Timing, as always, was precise. I shifted my focus back to Victoria, my expression unchanged, my voice calm when I finally spoke. "It ends when the truth stops hiding," I said, and for a brief moment, something flickered across her face. Not fear, not anger, but something closer to resignation. She let out a slow breath, her shoulders lowering just a fraction, and then she did something I had not expected. She smiled. Not the perfect smile she had worn all morning, not the carefully practiced one meant for rooms like this, but something smaller, quieter, almost real. "You were never supposed to notice this soon," she said, and there was no denial left in her words now, no attempt to redirect, just a statement of fact. The room reacted again, a subtle shift of attention, of awareness, of realization spreading through people who had come here expecting one kind of story and were now witnessing something entirely different. I took a step closer, not aggressive, not threatening, just enough to narrow the space between us to something more honest. "Soon," I repeated, because timing always reveals intention. Her gaze held mine, steady now, like she had chosen to stop hiding altogether. "Before the contract's finalized," she said quietly. "Before everything became permanent. Contracts. Not vows. Not promises. Contracts." The word landed exactly where it needed to, stripping away whatever illusion might have remained for anyone still trying to hold on to it. I nodded once, slow, deliberate, because now everything aligned. Every hesitation, every detail, every small inconsistency I had noticed but not yet named. This was never about partnership. It was about access, about leverage, about getting close enough to reshape something that was not meant to be touched. I turned slightly, just enough to look toward Daniel again, and this time he did not look away fast enough. That hesitation confirmed everything. "And him?" I asked, my tone neutral, as if the answer no longer held weight, because in truth, it did not. She followed my gaze, her expression unreadable now. "A bridge," she said simply. Nothing more. Daniel's jaw tightened, just for a second, but I did not react. People reveal themselves in the smallest moments, and I had already seen enough. I exhaled slowly, letting the silence stretch one final time, not for effect, not for control, but because there was nothing left to rush. The truth had arrived exactly when it needed to. I looked down again, just briefly, meeting Lily's eyes, and for the first time, something about her presence shifted in my mind, not as a variable, not as an interruption, but as something else entirely. A correction. I straightened, turning back toward the room, toward the guests, toward the version of this day that no longer existed, and I spoke with the same calm certainty I had started with, but now it carried a different meaning. "This is over," I said, not loudly, not dramatically, just clearly enough that no one could misunderstand it. And as the words settled into the space around us, I realized something I had not expected to realize today. Power is not proven in the moments you take control. It is proven in the moments you choose to let go of what should never have been yours in the first place. No one applauded, no one protested. No one even tried to interrupt, because when something real happens in a room built on appearances, people do not react. They observe, they remember, and they quietly adjust their understanding of who holds the power. Victoria lowered her gaze for the first time, not in defeat, but in acknowledgement, like she understood the outcome had shifted beyond her reach, and whatever she had planned no longer had a place to land. "You could have been useful," she said softly, almost to herself, her voice carrying none of the sharpness from before, only a trace of something reflective, like she was already moving on to the next calculation, the next move that would not include me. I did not respond. Utility has never been the measure I use for people, not when the cost is trust, and trust, once broken, is not something I rebuild. Daniel stepped back slightly, his role in all of this now reduced to exactly what she had called it. A bridge, something used, something temporary, something already forgotten. And in that moment, I realized he was never the risk, not really. The risk had always been believing that control meant immunity. I turned away from them both without another word, because there was nothing left to say that would change anything that mattered. The ceremony space opened in front of me again, but it no longer felt like a path towards something. It felt like a space I had already left behind, even before I took the first step. Conversations began to return in low murmurs, careful, measured, as if people were testing whether it was safe to speak again. And that told me everything about how the moment would be remembered, not as a scandal, not as a failure, but as a decision. I stopped when I reached Lily, looking down at her, not as a stranger anymore, but as someone who had shifted the course of something far larger than herself without hesitation. You changed the outcome, I said quietly, not as praise, not as surprise, just as truth. She looked up at me, her expression unchanged, still calm, still certain in a way that felt older than it should have. No, she replied softly. I just told you what you did not want to see. I studied her for a moment longer, letting that settle, because she was right. And truth like that does not come often, especially not from someone with nothing to gain. Why me? I asked, not because I needed the answer, but because I wanted to understand the reason behind her choice. She hesitated then, just for a second, the first real hesitation I had seen from her, and when she spoke again, her voice was quieter, almost careful. Because someone should have told my dad, she said. The words landed differently than anything else had that day. Not sharp, not immediate, but deep, like something that would take time to fully understand. I did not ask more. I did not need to. Some answers are not meant to be unpacked in the moment they are given. I nodded once, slow, acknowledging not just what she had done, but what it had cost her to do it. Around us, the room continued to return to itself, people stepping back into roles, into conversations, into the safety of normalcy, but I knew better. Nothing about this would be forgotten. I glanced once more toward the altar, toward the place where everything had almost been decided, and I felt something unfamiliar settle into place. Not regret, not anger, but clarity. I had built my life on knowing, on seeing, on controlling outcomes before they happened, and yet today, the only reason I had not made the wrong choice was because someone else had seen what I refused to. I looked back down at Lily one final time, and for the first time, my voice carried something different, not authority, not control, but something quieter. You did not save my wedding, I said. She watched me, waiting, understanding more than most ever would. I held her gaze for a second longer, then finished the only truth that mattered. You saved my judgment. And as I turned and walked away from everything that day had been meant to become, I understood something I had not understood before. Power can build walls, it can create distance, it can shape the world to your will, but it cannot protect you from the one thing that matters most. The moment you choose to believe a lie simply because it fits the life you planned.